We've entered draft month, and that means there are tons of mock drafts out there predicting the Jets will do just about anything. I thought it might be interesting to break down my take on these mock drafts and give them an overall grade. The first mock I'll be diving into is very busy. NFL Network mock draft had the Jets making 3 trades in the first round. Let's break down these trades first. So we moved down from 4 to 9 with the Seahawks. We picked up their 5th rounder this year, and we picked up a 1st rounder next year, trading away picks 4 and 111 this year. The Seattle Seahawks would then go on and select Matt Corral at that 4th overall selection. I don't know if I would do that as the Seahawks front office, but that's what this mock had them doing. It seems a little bit off. And then with that 9th overall pick, we picked Sauce Gardner. Awesome pick. I love the guy. I would have liked to have gotten edge here myself. If I don't remember exactly if there was a guy like Jermaine Johnson still on the board, even a guy like Karlaftis, I would take. I think edge is so important for this future, and for us to not take a guy like that at the first pick that we get on the board doesn't. But I suppose he supposedly ran faster than Patrick Mahomes at 350 pounds. That is a guy who might take over this league. He seems like he could be fantastic coming out of Georgia. So maybe that's an awesome move for the Eagles, but we also picked up a 3rd and a 5th round pick from that trade. And that's pretty great for us. That's pretty good for us. And then at the end of the first round, we want to trade up. And who is our dancing partner? None other than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We trade picks 35, a 4th this year, and a 5th this year. Those were both picked up through the 4th round pick we had from our own original pick, and then the 5th was the pick that we got from Seattle. And then we picked up pick 27. And who do we select? None other than Nakobe Dean, the linebacker out of Georgia. I think he would be a great pairing with CJ Mosley for this year, and then he can definitely, I think, have a great season this year. Maybe not on the stat sheet, but have a pretty solid, productive year for the Jets, and then step into that lead middle linebacker role the following season under Robert Saleh. In the second round, they had us picking Arnold Ebiketie, the edge out of Penn State. Now, this is where they address the edge need. Again, I think we need to address it earlier. It doesn't really make sense why we would wait all the way until this time to pick a guy at such a high value position in the NFL. Pick 69, we picked Zamir White, running back out of Georgia. So that's 2 guys out of Georgia that we picked. Another running back that can tandem Michael Carter, a guy who had an awesome rookie year and is looking like we're probably going to do a running back by committee for most of his career, which will help elongate his career, and he's probably going to step into, hopefully play better than Bilal Powell's, but somewhat in a Bilal Powell type of role. And then this was a 4-round mock, so we traded away our 4th round pick, but our last pick was pick 83, and that was the guard out of UCLA, Sean Ryan. I don't know much about the guy. Probably a developmental piece that we can hopefully see a long-term starter overall. Maybe that means after, maybe we can. I don't know about his versatility. Maybe it's possible to bring him into center, develop him for a year, and see what he can do. But this was ultimately an up and down mock draft. We wanted to grab an edge in the first, as that's been such a huge need for us, but landing Sauce Gardner, Drake London, and Nakobe Dean in the first round is very interesting. There's a lot of potential there, and some scouts are starting to turn up for Ebiketie as the edge out of Penn State. as well as getting a running back mate for Michael Carter and a guy who can develop in the interior offensive line for the Jets. My overall grade for this mock draft, B-. We should have grabbed the edge earlier, like I said before, to make sure we're getting a guy that we truly feel good about and can see in our system. I don't know if we will necessarily find that in Ebiketie, but he could also prove me wrong in just a few seasons. I also have Treylon Burks ranked higher in my wide receiver rankings than Drake London when it comes to what the Jets are really looking for. I also think it's possible the Jets take Jameson Williams with the 15th overall pick, who plays similarly to Henry Ruggs. And we won't go into the off-field issues with Ruggs here, but Williams is a much better prospect than Ruggs ever was. And certain reporters have said that the Jets would have drafted him had Mekhi Becton already been drafted in the 2020 draft. Next, I'd like to dive into the CBS mock draft. They went with a 105 pick mock draft. And this one was just a little bit interesting. I don't know if I was the only one who thought that this was a terrible mock draft, but in my opinion, this was pretty bad. So it starts off pretty well with pick 4 with Travon Walker at edge out of Georgia. I think that would be a great pick. He would be more of a developmental piece. It might take some time to see him become the player we know he can be, but ultimately, if a defensive coordinator is going to give him the tools that he needs to succeed at that next level, he is going to be phenomenal. He's going to tear up the league because his athletic scores are just off the chains, and his athletic scores are just off the charts, and you can't teach most of that stuff. You can't teach raw athletic ability. He's going to be an insane athlete at the next level, and you hope a guy like Saleh can put all the pieces together in a guy like Travon Walker. The pick 10 is where it starts getting interesting. They went with Trevor Penning, tackle out of Northern Iowa, while Drake London, Jameson Williams, Treylon Burks, and maybe even some trade down scenarios were available at the time. We then went with Lewis Cine at pick 35, safety out of Georgia, and we finally addressed the wide receiver need at pick 38 out of North Dakota State, Christian Watson, a guy who has a few knocks on his resume just because he did play at North Dakota State. He played with Trey Lance for a few years, so he's gotten a bit of a bump there. We don't know exactly who he is as a prospect, but ultimately I think he will be a pretty good player for us if he is drafted. So maybe it's a move, maybe it's something that the Jets could look into. I don't know about that one though. And they have us wrapping it up with pick 69 in Nick Bonitto, an edge out of Oklahoma. So double dipping at the edge position, seeing if we can try to solidify that position in the draft. I don't hate that mindset. I think it could possibly help us, especially with the fact that it seems like Robert Saleh wants to run a system where you're rotating in guys and you're not leaving these heavy defensive linemen on the field for massive amount of plays every game. Because I'm sure that, because we saw at the end of games that our running defense just completely fell out from under us and our defensive linemen just couldn't hold up at the end of the day. Ultimately, I think this draft would get Joe Douglas fired. There's an enormous amount of pressure to find Zach a wide receiver 1, and according to reports, the Jets were in on everyone and got no one in the trade market in terms of wide receiver. So those rumors saying the Jets will draft a receiver in the first round of the 2022 NFL draft, to not go down that direction, to me, would be a mistake. In a lot of ways, Penning getting drafted to the Jets at 10 would be very similar to the Raiders going with Alex Leatherwood at pick 17 in last year's draft. For that reason, I'm giving this mock an F. There's a lot of potential for Christian Watson, and Nick Bonitto is a guy to watch out of Oklahoma. But this draft wouldn't cut it in my position, in my opinion. The Jets would be taking an edge with their first pick, but I'd rather go receiver or Sauce if he's still available at 10. Trevor Penning at 10 is way too risky for my liking. The only way that I can see us getting Trevor Penning is if we move back up for him. I don't see us drafting him at 10. Or if we end up moving down and getting multiple picks possibly. Because I still think that receiver is a major need for us. Elijah Moore is one of the only receivers to break the second round bust mold for the New York Jets. I think that's another sign that's kind of leading me towards not wanting to go with Watson. I know it's a little superstitious, but I think getting a guy that we feel a little bit more confident in and getting a guy that we feel can really help us at that position will be a better decision, especially with Saleh's propensity to teach young guys, young defensive backs, young edge rushers, young defensive linemen. Solomon Thomas came in and he just had his best season last year. Maybe he can even build upon that in Saleh's new system. So I think getting some guys on offense getting a guy on offense in the first round that can really take the top off the field will be a great benefit to the Jets. The last mock draft I want to cover this week is the Ringers NFL mock draft. This was just a one-round mock draft, so it'll be a little bit shorter, but I thought it was pretty interesting to include. So at pick 4, they had us picking Sauce Gardner, cornerback out of Cincinnati, who we mentioned before. Again, another great pick, but I would much rather have an edge rusher there. And at pick 10, they had us picking Garrett Wilson, wide receiver out of Ohio State. I really like Wilson. He's probably my wide receiver 1 in this year's draft. I really like Treylon Burks too, as I mentioned before. I think they both are going to shine in different ways. I think Jameson Williams is even a possibility. I know that the injury happened, but some rumors have him possibly being ready to play by week 1, which would be amazing for him, where you're not even going to really miss the time. He's going to miss training camp, which might be a detriment to him overall, but he might come out the gates just as that wide receiver 1 prospect that we were expecting him to be before that injury. And with Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeaux going with picks 1 and 2 respectively, that put the Jets in a weird spot at number 4 when the Texans inevitably drafted a tackle, whether that is Evan Neal or Ikem Ekwonu. It's going to put us in a weird position. This mock had the Jets drafting Sauce, and although I would love to have him on the Jets, I don't know if it's a great pick for our team's needs, and he may struggle when entering the league like other corners picked that high have. Grabbing Trayvon Walker, who went 7th in this mock, or Jermaine Johnson, who went, I believe, 11th or 12th in this mock as well. Maybe a better pick in Saleh's system, as he relies so heavily on a pass rush. I would be fine with drafting Garrett Wilson at 10, or even possibly Treylon Burks, as those are my top 2 receivers in this year's draft, as I mentioned before. Overall, I gave this mock draft a B-. I see the potential for Sauce and Garrett Wilson, but I think the Jets must walk out of day 1 of the NFL draft with an edge threat that can complement Carl Lawson. Whether that be Kayvon Thibodeaux, Trayvon Walker, or Jermaine Johnson, I think that's the guy that needs to be on the card when the Jets are on the clock at number 4 overall. And again, Wilson, Burks, or even Jameson Williams would be solid pickups to me at pick 10 overall. Also, another quick note on Wilson. The Ringer compared the Ohio State receiver to OBJ on Red Bull. That sounds like a pretty good comp to me. That marks the end of this video. Let me know what you thought of these mock drafts in the comments down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Peace out, Jets fans.